Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. If you're just joining, go ahead and drop your name and affiliation into the chat, but I just want to welcome everyone. This is our last CEMW meeting of the fiscal year. If you participate in a beautiful fiscal year from July 1 to June 30th, which many agencies do and we do at SCORP. So we'll talk about moving forward, but we've got exciting new things moving forward as well. So hopefully you can see my screen, but I wanted to first just talk about, we've got kind of a jam-packed agenda today. The first part of the agenda is really, you guys are just listening to me talk. I'm gonna just hash out what we went through in our last meeting, and then we'll talk about the two CEMW work items that we've been working on. And so you'll hear from me as well as Kat Peshti. And then the bulk of today is to really hear about 3 different projects. So the focus of our meeting is really on tribal projects, collaborations, and engagement. And so Marissa McGrew, who's also a, what am I? I'm not a co-host. What am I? What is my role here? Co-chair. Co-chair. I just want everyone to know I'm having a hard time with words today, but it is what it is. So co-chair, and she will be leading that part. And so we'll talk more. We've got some great presenters today. And then the last bit, we're just going to talk about the fall meeting. We are hoping to do a joint meeting with the California Wetland Monitoring Work Group in person, and we had some brainstorming last week about what we might want to do for that meeting and the types of outcomes that we might want to have. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but that will be coming soon as well. Okay, so I just like to remind everyone that the CEMW, so the California Estuary Monitoring Work Group, our main goal here is to advance the science and practice of estuary monitoring and assessment in California and to improve coordination and information sharing. So this is definitely a group where you can reach out. So it's me, Pike, and Marissa, who are the co-chairs. We're happy to add things to the agenda, or if you have announcements. I just want to reiterate that this is a collaborative work group. And so although sometimes I do a lot of the talking, it really needs to be driven by its members. As you can see, when we rebooted in March of last year, this is now our 5th meeting. So that is very exciting. And so we'll be planning, looking ahead to the next year of meetings. So our last meeting was on March 20th. This was a meeting that was really focused on individuals sharing out different projects that they were working on. After each meeting, I do send out the agenda, the notes, and all of the slides. And so you can get that by subscribing to the Water Board listserv, and that link is always in the agenda. And so if you need that link, just message me in the chat, and when I stop sharing, I will shoot that over to you. But we had 3 big topics that we talked about. So Eric Zahn from Tidal Influence presented on the Los Cerritos restoration project that's happening down here in Southern California. And I can share these slides again, but I just wanted to pull out some stuff that they are starting to begin really the restoration that's happening at Los Cerritos. So it's been a long process, but moving forward, they have a restoration plan, and they have what they are saying is now ready to do the project. So upcoming this year is going to begin all of the monitoring. And I'm not quite sure when they are breaking ground, but if you have any questions, you can reach out to me and I could connect you with Eric Zahn. So he did a great presentation on the Los Cerritos wetland restoration. Another great item that we had presented on was the Pew Charitable Trust and the California Marine Sanctuaries are putting together an additional work group. So OPC just released their ideas for the 30 by 30 process, specifically the type of criteria that they will be using to set protected areas. And so we had a great presentation by Pew on this work group that they're putting together. They are calling it the Bayland and Estuary Experts Sciencing Towards 30 by 30, or BEAST. And they are soliciting people to join this work group now. Again, this work group will be all about writing a public comment in order to inform or to respond to what OPC just put out in terms of 30 by 30. And this work group will be very estuary specific focused. So here's the contact information there. Rebecca is leading up this work group. And so her email is rebecca@coastalpolicysolutions.com. You can also reach out to Joss as well as Bobby, and Bobby's actually on the call, so you could direct message him as well. And then lastly, at the last meeting, we just talked about our regional monitoring spring updates. It's crazy because since our last meeting was March and now it's June, I think spring is over. So we had lots of great updates from the EMPA program, the BITE program, the WRMP talked about some things, and spring sampling seemed to go well and people did it. And so I thought it was fun that everyone was sharing out ideas. And I think we'll do this again come fall. As I know many of us, I know that the SONGS program kicks up in the fall, will be out monitoring the estuaries. And I think this is a good way to start sharing, since we're really focused here at CEMW on monitoring, about where people are in our estuaries. So that's our recap from our last meeting. I now want to talk about specifically our work items. So when we first rebooted in last March, we prioritized specific projects that CEMW wanted to work on, and we selected 2. So the first one was to create a clearinghouse or website of existing monitoring programs. And so I've been working with Rosemary on this. And so I'll give you an update on where we are with that. And then Kat Beheshti has been leading up our second work item, which is to develop matrices that relate questions to indicators and monitoring approaches. And so Kat will give you an update on these 2 work items. As we move forward with these work items, one of our goals for the fall will be to reevaluate where we stand with each of these work items, how we want to move forward, and whether or not we want to add more projects into our queue for any future projects that this work group would want to work on. So our first work item was to create a clearinghouse or website of existing monitoring programs. So the goal here was that we know that there's tons of monitoring going on, but there's no central place that actually shows a user where that monitoring is happening. So our goal here was to actually compile and synthesize monitoring information into an easy, accessible, and digestible format. So what we've been doing over the last few meetings is we've created a table with monitoring information. This was just a Google Doc that we sent out to many different listservs. And let's just say that we've gotten some minimal feedback. I checked it today, and I am the last person that edited it. So I think we need to keep shopping this around. We are starting to get a lot of good information, I think, and I think we can still move forward. I think one of our goals is to create some type of Shiny app or map that we can embed in the CEMW website so that people can easily access where monitoring is happening. So I want to ask the group now how we want to move forward with this work item. So I know for a fact that we don't have all the monitoring information on this spreadsheet. We can wait another 3 months and do a better job at really sending it out, sending out to more listservs, or maybe we need to do some direct sending to our colleagues and say, fill this out. I don't think that we need to do anything except that, and then we can re-talk in our fall meeting how we want to move forward. But I just wanted to get your guys' ideas, or how can we incentivize this spreadsheet? What are we thinking? Yeah, Rosemary.
Yeah, and I'll apologize that this has been on the back burner for the past couple months, but I have some more time, and in all of my herding of cats, sending something out to a listserv and saying, please fill us out, never works. And there needs to be a lot more targeted direct sending to certain people, and definitely a few more calls to listserv like, hey, we really mean it, please by this date, give us your stuff. So I can start sending those nagging emails. Certainly, if anyone on this call has suggestions of who is in charge of monitoring surveys that I should be bugging, let me know.
That's great. Yeah. I'm also happy to sit down with you, Rosemary, and we can brainstorm some ideas. I think we have a lot of the big programs that have been entered, like the Songs program, the EMPA program. Um, I know that we have Oregon State's information on there, Elkhorn Slough. I don't think we have the Tijuana NER, so we need to make sure we get that. But we've got a lot of the big programs. I think what we also want to start thinking about is if there's any more local or community groups that are also doing monitoring that we want to capture within this bigger spreadsheet. I mean, I do think we can move forward and create a very dynamic map that can constantly add information to. But I do want to wait, I think, a few more months to compile some more of that information. Does anyone else have any feedback on any of this? Okay, so Rosemary, why don't you send me an email too, and we can kind of brainstorm a little bit more. There is a subcommittee that has been focusing on this as well, and so we haven't met in a very long time. So maybe we want to bring that group back together as well and start to think more about how we want to move forward with that. So if you're interested in working on this work item, please send me or Rosemary an email as well. Okay, work item number 2. Kat, do you want to just talk about this one?
Yeah, thanks, Jan. Okay, so just to remind everyone, there's 3 like kind of sub-tasks within this work item, and we are still wrapping up the first of those, which was to develop a set of slides and that are basically depicting our agreed upon understanding of estuarine health, function, and services. And so we met last week to review the last iteration of that slide deck and are hoping to finalize it in the next month. And then the idea is that then we would be moving on to the second and third subtasks within this work item. And so next slide, please, Jan. And so, like I said, we're working on finalizing those. They're coming together quite nicely. As always, when you get a whole bunch of estuarine ecologists and managers together, there's a lot of comments and feedback, and we all feel very strongly about all of our different respective places and things like that. So we're trying to be as inclusive as possible and represent California's estuaries as broadly as we possibly can without getting too in the weeds. I think the dream is to have this be sort of like a template that within it we have mini versions that could be maybe most appropriate for decision makers versus managers versus researchers versus those that are monitoring. And so, and maybe even some of a geographic focus, but that might be outside the scope of this particular work item. We'll see. That's the dream, so that we could all utilize this slide deck to its full potential and cater it to our specific needs as fine-tuned as possible. That said, we don't have that much representation of wetland folks from the North Coast currently in our work group. And so luckily there are folks within our current work group that are advocating for more inclusion of sites and representation from those North Coast estuaries and wetlands. But it would be great to have some of our North Coast folks join to make sure that they see their estuaries reflected in this slide deck. And then after we finalize that, which again, the goal is to try and finalize it this month, or actually, no, we're in the middle of the month. That's probably possible. And then, and then meet with the working group, our work group again, and start to really get into the meat of this work item, which is developing the programmatic and guiding questions for our statewide estuarine monitoring efforts, and develop the indices and matrices that would build on a lot of the EMPA effort. And so that's the next step. So we're moving out of the aesthetically creative part and moving into the more intellectually creative part. And so if any of you are interested in joining that work group and participating, we encourage it and would love to have you join us. And so you can reach out to either Jan or myself, and our emails are at the bottom of the slide here.
Are there specific questions for Kat on this work item or the slides in general? Okay, I just want to add that I think one of the main objectives that came out of the first few meetings that we had as CEMW rebooted was that there's a lot of regional and local efforts going on. But if we want to start to be able to answer these statewide questions that are of interest to a lot of our agencies, then we need to start to make sure that we agree on a lot of the backbone. So a lot of the conceptual models and like, what are those programmatic and guiding questions? What would a statewide estuary monitoring program look like, right? Like, we know it's not going to look like the Tampa Bay monitoring program, right? It's California is huge. We're never probably going to have one central monitoring network, but rather a network of regional efforts. And so our role, or one of our roles at CEMW, could be to help bridge across all of those regional and local efforts in order to answer these broader questions about California's resources. And so this work item really is focused on that. And I think there's lots of different steps, and Kat's doing a great job doing that. And then I'll just say that hopefully this work item nexuses really well with the first work item as well. So we'll be able to start to know where are all the regional and local monitoring happening. And so where is the data that we're going to be pulling from to be able to answer these programmatic and guiding questions. And so those are really big goals. And maybe that's not a 2024 goal, but a 2025 or 6 or 7. But I think we're on the right path to really starting to work towards these bigger visions. So we really do welcome feedback on all of this and any ideas that anyone else might have. So if there's anything, I just want to pause to give people a chance before I just steamroll ahead. Okay, I'm getting smirks. I'll keep going. I also want to add that there is effort happening to have a central CEMW website. So if you're new to this work group, you might have tried to Google us, and there is a portal page which is linked to the regular water board page. It's significantly out of date. It was made maybe 10 years ago. And CEMW really had a San Francisco Bay focus. So that's where a lot of the resources are born out of. And are currently being hosted on the CEMW page, but we recently just overhauled it, and we're in the queue to launching it. And so I'm going to be reviewing it with water board staff next week. And so hopefully then that means that we can push it live. It'll be very bare bones. And so in a future meeting, we'll talk about what types of resources we'll want to add to it. But the good thing about having the CEMW website or portal page is that we can start to add the slide deck that Kat created. We can add a link to the monitoring information. We can embed a Shiny app or some type of app with all the monitoring information. We can provide resources, and then we can provide all of the CEMW meeting notes, agenda, recordings, and things like that. So I do want to tell you that that is on our radar. And if you attend any other monitoring work groups for the water board, all of us are working through that same process. And I believe some of them have actually gone live, but Estuary's was we were closer to the bottom of the queue, but we've reached our time. So I will let everyone know when that launches. Okay. Okay, so we're really ahead of schedule, which means it's going to be great. We're going to have lots of time for discussion. I'm going to hand it over to Marissa. And so the next focus of today is really on listening, and then hopefully having a discussion on ways to collaborate and engage more with more of these tribal projects and collaborations. So I will stop sharing, and Marissa, you can go ahead and I don't know if you had slides or anything, but everyone should have access to share. So you'll be able to kind of go over the day, and then everyone should be able to share as well. Okay. Thank you, Jan. So can everyone see my screen? Okay, fabulous. So yeah, all right. Iaqui and Hawatlo, everyone. My name is Marissa McGrew. I am of Yurok descent and fisheries biologist for the Wiyot tribe, as well as serving as co-chair with Jan and Pike. And yeah, I'm excited for what we're going to be talking about today. I'm just kind of setting us up. So our discussion objectives, I want to emphasize, like, this is not meant to be a how-to on how to engage with tribes. I think you can spend your whole life trying to figure that out. But what I will say on that is to simply educate yourself on whose land you live on and or work on. If there's a tribal office, let alone a natural resources department within that tribal office of the sort, I really encourage folks to like show up in person and meet the people working there and introduce yourself and come to the table with solutions and opportunities. And also accept that you will probably make mistakes when engaging with tribes and working with tribes. And realize that this is your time to listen. And because it's so important, listen is on here twice. Especially when speaking to elders, I've experienced that I don't receive direct answers, but I have the privilege of hearing stories, and you can listen to the answers within those stories. Finally, when working for a tribe, big picture wise, like, I'm not thinking of how much I'll get done in my tenure here, but rather I'm thinking of how to best set up the work for the next generation, because folks can up and move, but tribes are here to stay. And I'm just ending on this photo of goat dao, or Pacific lamprey, which is an incredibly important fish for the Wiyot tribe and many, many other tribes. Wiyot tribe shares its name with Wiyot, or its western name, the Eel River, which is how the river acquired that name and what the last two photos were showing. And with that, again, this is really short, but I want to get to our speakers. And so with that, I think Rudy Lopez and Race Richards are our first speakers. So I will stop sharing.
Give us 1 minute, please. We're getting everything set up. It's loading up right. So we're gonna be on the same computer right now. We're in the same office, so it got kind of an echo, so works out better if we are on the same screen. Loading it up. We're loading it up right now. Sorry for the wait.
Oh, don't apologize. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it was on his computer, so it has to be logged off his computer to be put on mine. So I'm trying to figure that out. I apologize. Oh, sorry. All right. It's taking a minute to load up. Good old PowerPoint. Yeah, I thought we had a couple more minutes. There we go. Just 1 second, getting this share screen set up. You guys see the screen, everything and all right? All right, we're all ready to go.
So you just need to switch the display real quick because we can see your presenter view.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
So just go to display settings, I think, and that should switch for you.
Having problems with this. We are having some issues right now. Yeah, sorry about that. We apologize. We thought we had it all figured out. Just so then we should be good. I think I got it. And then it look good for everybody, right?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Perfect. All right, sorry for the wait. Space bar. Okay, all right, here we go. All right, so everybody, Wagayanshan, Shikushu Rudy, Dayakushu Lopez. My name is Rudy Lopez. I'm a citizen and a tribal resource specialist with Tallaway Dani Nation. So we're just gonna give a brief summary of our monitoring for our slumps and chuikani. Slumps would be our word for day smelt, and chuikani is our word for night smelt. Okay. So just to give a brief overview right here, this is our ancestral territory. Right here in this red circle is our reservation. Traditionally, most of our land was in Oregon, all the way from the Sixes River down to the mouth of the Wilson Creek. About 100 miles of coastline traditionally we held, and about 100 miles inland. Most of our monitoring is done in the north part of Delmar County. So this is our day smelt chunks. Now, traditionally, it's a culturally important species for us. And before colonialization, every summer, we basically live on the beaches and have annual fish camps to be able to dry smelt on the beach to be able to have food for the winter. So this has always been a very important like subsidy for us. And we started noticing a decline about give or take 10, 15 years ago. So that's when the tribe created a marine program and brought Rosa in to create this marine program to try to identify and understand why we had a decline in species. And so some of the monitoring we do has to do with finding the absence and presence of eggs, and we'll get into that later, and eDNA sampling. And this is my old picture of them collecting the fish. And traditionally, the men would go out and fish, and the women didn't fish. They would actually stay on the beach, and they would dry the fish on. They would lay out beach grasses, create smelt beds, and dry them in the sun. And it would be a constant, at least a 2-week job before the fish were dried. So it was culturally, everybody was involved. It was a community event. And to this day, a few families still do this. And this is what we're trying to maintain culturally. Excuse me. Here's a video of J-Tuck coming out here and fishing. Now, what we do is we try to watch the birds. The birds are our scouts here. So what we do is we watch the birds and they give us an idea of where the fish are and where we kind of step back, observe and watch the ocean and watch the birds. And that's how we know when the fish are there. So this is part of our gravel bed mapping. And what we do is every year we monitor 2 different beaches, and we have different sections of the beach. And we try to monitor ideal sized gravel for the spawning grounds for the smelt, for the day smelt specifically. And so since the gravel changes and the size changes every year, we're trying to understand if there's presence and absence in the ideal sized gravel beds, and GPS data, all of the movement of the gravel beds to find out where the most ideal places that the fish would come or not come back to. And for the most part, it changes every year. So there's some consistent places, but other parts, it moves around so much that it's not consistent enough to be until maybe 5-10 years of data to be able to understand what this. So with our eDNA, we started this in about 2021. We have about 7 different sites that we do. We originally started off doing it every week. As our resources started to get dwindled down, we do it every season now. And this is a good indicator of the absence or presence. The only downside to this is it doesn't tell you the abundance or how much of it is in the beach. So idea is that you can't really, there's not really a perfect time to go smelt fishing. You can't just use the tide or a certain time of day to go get fish. Like you got to actually be on the beach and watch the ocean, watch the birds, and be there, a part of the ecosystem to actually get these fish. So it's kind of a hard thing to do to be able to get samples and see the abundance unless we're on the beach. Most of summer we spend on the beach trying to follow the fish, understand the patterns. And if it's not us, it's different families on the beach, and we're always trying to maintain and keep an eye out on the ocean. And so as the years went by, we created a program. We called it Neshine. Neshine in our word translates to the watchman. And so what we do is we get tribal youth to come involved in our monitoring, get them an idea and a culturally relevant understanding of the ecosystem. And then we try to teach them cultural parts of fishing. Fishing isn't just putting your net in the water or just going to the beach and fishing. It's actually a spiritual and a cultural practice that we hold value to. So certain parts of this, like see how our nets are facing away from the ocean. Like we respect the ocean. We're not going to like, same idea as pointing a knife to you. We're not going to point our nets to the ocean until we're ready to fish. So this is our summer youth and our stewardship program, putting together the first nets that we made. And they make these, and then they have this relationship with the wood they made from the beach we got it from, and then the fish they catch on the beach. And it keeps us and them, as they learn, culturally close and connected to what they're doing here. So it's not just getting food, it's actually connecting yourself with the ecosystem. And I think that creates a more valid appreciation for what we're doing. Here's this is the dried fish, the result of that. Now how we do this is we don't wash it off with fresh water. We let it sit in the milt, and the solidity of that dries out the fish, and we have a winter food resource. And we've been doing this is probably a good 60 years ago, and we've been doing this since time immemorial. So this is part of who we are. And this is a modern day picture of it. And right here is only 2 or 3 beds, and traditionally we would have hundreds of beds down the beach. So the decline is so drastic that there's not even enough fish to sustain multiple families, let alone an entire tribe. And so that's the idea of why we're here right now. And here's a reference of the day smelt on the left and the night smelt, the chuikeni, on the right. Now, the reason why, obviously, it's a bigger fish, so it's a more sustainable resource, and it's about double the size. We still fish for night fish, but the day fish is more of a staple food for us, and so we're really trying to get the grasp on why the decline is in this. So I'm gonna let Race kind of go over the chuikeni or night fish with you guys and explain a little bit about
that. And so this is a picture of a good catch of chuhani we got, and chuhani are definitely a little bit different, especially culturally significance wise, compared to smelt or schlumps. And it's just night is a lot scarier. It's a lot more difficult, especially out in the ocean and the waves. It's more dangerous. So when, of course, the schlumps were plentiful, there's not too much reason to go out in the middle of the night and try to get these fish, which are smaller and just more dangerous to get. And so we did it in cooperation with Jose from Humboldt State in 2021 is when we really started it alongside the MPA baseline project. And we mostly catch a lot of our fish on Yonnosset, which is a beach more south of our territory than Dotnosset. We don't really see them run out there quite all that much for the night fish at all, but Schlumpsch is where we normally catch them, is on Dotnosset, and that's where those pictures of those beds were. And these are just some pictures of us out in the night doing night fish. And I know the bottom one looks like it might be daytime, but I think it was just a longer exposure picture. And the top right's night vision of one of our coworkers. And it's definitely a really great time going out there and having people that, you know, we're all kind of pretty close together, especially as we've grown up doing a lot of this stuff together and helping each other out, helping each other build the nets, go catch the fish, look out for one another in the water. And so it's really just a significant experience that is almost just relaxing to have it, but at the same time, in the moment, can be stressful. And so here's a couple more pictures of it. The Chuhaney and the nets, of course, a good little bigger catch on the right side. And some more little pictures. We traditionally, or well, standardly just go run the beach for about 4 hours and try to do a catch per unit effort. And so we have hopefully 4 people if we can do it, otherwise we adjust. But 4 people fishing for 4 hours, and we'll run up and down the beaches in a mule just because the beaches are such a long extent. Walking them is possible, but it's much more difficult, much more tiring, especially if you actually catch any fish. Because for the sample size, I think it's only a Ziploc baggie or so, give or take. Forget the exact amount, but when we go to harvest, you know, we want a good amount of fish, as many as we can get, or as many as we're willing to process. And so we'll run up and down the beach with the mule using our spotlights to look into the water, and they'll kind of glimmer and shine when you see them in the waves. And so we try not to keep the lights on them all the time just to not disturb them or scare them off the beaches. Similar to like schlumps, you don't play in the water, you don't let your dogs play in the water because they'll smell you and they'll know not to come in because of the predators. And so you always try to give respect to it just because you're here for them and they're here to provide for you. And so the picture on the right is, if I remember right, I think it's the smelt eggs. I'm not sure if we were able to ID which one it was in particular, but I mean, that's a very small pebble, less than the size of a fingernail. And that's the kind of gravel they're looking for when they want to spawn. That's the point of our gravel bed mapping and everything, to help try and identify the main cause of the loss of the population, just because we're not sure if it's lack of habitat, too much urbanization, just changes seasonally, changes to the landscape, climate change, whatever it may be. It's hard to really pin down what it is. And so it's definitely been a really great project. I mean, we've been able to give a lot of this food out, especially with the lack of schlumpsch at times. We've been able to use this food to give out to our tribal community members to at least have a taste of it. They taste fairly similar, and I mean, sometimes they're a little bit nicer even because it's a smaller, more bite-sized type of thing. And then with the way we prepare them nowadays, compared to just drying them on the beach, we kind of like fillet them open and take out the backbone and off the fin, take the fins off and the heads off, and it makes it kind of like a little a fish strip or something. And it's much more appealable to people who aren't used to eating fish, or they think it's kind of creepy. Because when I was growing up, you just toss the whole thing in a pan, fry them up, and bread them up, and just eat the whole thing. And the tail is my best part because it's just like a little chip. And so it's kind of like unique when people see you eating it like that compared to the other way. So we especially do that for education and outreach, and sometimes compare the both because it's just personal preference on how you like to eat it. This is some processing of a lot of fish or night fish that we got. This was actually, we caught a good majority of it, but there's also some given to us from a commercial fisherman who was out there because there's a commercial market for these. They'll run the beach, fill up these coolers, and then drive a couple hours away to go sell them. And they're mostly used for like baits and food for like aquariums and stuff like that with sea lions and everything. And this was a really late night too because of all that fish. I mean, we started at like 11 or 12 and then got off the beach, I don't know, at like 2 or 3, and left the office at like 6 in the morning because we were just sitting there processing all this fish, bagging it up and separating it, washing it all off. Even though normally we wouldn't, if we would dry it, but we wanted to get it all clean off sand and the mill and the seawater or salt water. And so it was definitely like a big endeavor to get that much. I mean, you can see that freezer is pretty much entirely full, and there's a couple other things in there, but it's almost entirely night fish in there. So it was quite a good harvest, and it's definitely been awesome working with this project and being able to have the night fish around and work with them a little more and see if there's any relationship between them and the schlumps and what they do. And so yeah, I think that's just about all we have for you guys today. If there's any questions or comments, now would be the time. Alrighty, sounds like we're good.
Well, I have, wait. There's gonna be lots of
No problem, no
comments.
problem.
Okay, go ahead, Rachel, you can go first.
Does the net construction or methodology change between the night fishing and the day fishing?
No, they're still just the same A-frame nets that we would use.
Okay.
I wouldn't see any specific reason for wanting to change up. They pretty much do the same thing. The only thing different between even mine and his net is mine is actually a little bit shorter because I made a mistake while I was making it. But a lot of times you want to do it proportionate to your own size as well. And so I like mine just because it's a little bit more lightweight. And once you get a bag full of fish and everything, or if you get extra low gravel in there, trying to pick that up in the middle of the waves, it is quite a lot of weight. And so much so that if you don't do it properly and be careful while you do it, I've hurt myself a little bit just from picking the net up.
Yeah. And
Great,
as
thank
fishing
you.
wise, the difference would be in how we look for the smelt. So during the daytime, we watch the birds, watch the waves, kind of see if there's any predators in the water. At night, you can't really see anything. And like you said, they run from the light. So what we're trying to do is look for a shimmer of the fish in the water and look for them on the backwash. So how we find the fish is different at night, but how we fish for them is similar.
Thank you. Great talk.
Great question. Anyone else?
Go ahead, Pike.
Yeah, thanks. This was an awesome talk, guys. Really appreciate it. Just a couple off the cuff questions, and sorry if you already said this, but which do you like, the night smelt or the day smelt better? Like which do you like eating more? Which tastes better?
Personally, I like the taste of the night fish better. I think it has
Yeah.
something to do with how he talked about it's more of a bite-sized fish. My kids love it. Like he said, traditionally we just cooked it all in one. It's more appealing to take the spines out. You're not crunching on backbones and sacks of whatever, but the elders, they love that day fish, that's something that traditionally they've always had. But as we're losing the decline of day fish, we're trying to substitute that with a similar species of night fish. So, I mean, you can't really tell when you're putting it in butter and cooking it like that. But I mean, personally, I like the taste of night fish better, but I won't turn down either one.
Right on, thanks. And I'd love to follow up with you guys about this later, maybe Luke and Rosa as well. But I was wondering if you take any tissue samples when you do the net monitoring, and if they are taken, if they're preserved.
I was gonna say, I think Jose and them do. I think they do those samples. They do diet, they do otolith, and I'm not sure exactly what else, but I'm pretty sure that they do in the sample size. But we
Awesome.
don't
Thanks.
ourselves, like especially when we just harvest for subsistence, we don't.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Awesome. Thanks.
No problem.
And there's a chat question, and then I'll go to you, Kevin. Bobby in the chat asked, what are the most likely drivers of decline?
I would probably go with mainly urbanization, just because we haven't really gotten to analyze the gravel bed mapping data, and we have got the project going for quite a while now, so I'm excited to analyze it. But from what I can tell, it seems like there's plenty of habitat, and I mean the beaches are getting smaller due to other factors, like we have European beach grass that is all over our beaches, and with those stabilizing the dunes, they don't our sand doesn't move at all, and so our beaches are getting shorter and shorter every year due to that. That might be a cause. And then especially out on this side, just urbanization, too much activity in the waters, too many like light pollution. Um, Probably a good combination of all that. I mean, a little bit of climate change. And I know that sometimes they would seasonally come and go a little bit more. Like, this year would be really good. And then for the next couple years, they would still be present and in decent amounts, but not in quite the same amount as that year. I think it would be like, I don't know, I've heard differences of like 2, 3, or 4 year cycles kind of. But at this point we're at now, it's been much longer than that natural cycle. So it's starting to look at other options.
In my own opinion, there's traditional protocols, not just of scientific, but like a traditional protocols about keeping the kids out of the water, or not playing in the water, or not even spitting in the water. And I think part of that, and I've noticed it myself, is the fish, they start to see when there's movement on the beach, or when people are feet, they smell, they see, they feel, they see energy, feel energy. And I think throughout the past 20 years, the remote beach that our ancestors used to fish on is now full of houses and people walking on the beach with their dogs and all these things. And I think that has something to do with it personally, versus our ancestors and grandparents fishing on the beach that had nobody there and completely remote. And they understood the balance of how you fish versus having tourists and people coming and surfing and playing in the beach and swimming and surfing and all these different things. And I think that the fish start to see that movement and choose other places to spawn or don't come back to this beach at all. But that's just my opinion, and that's how I feel about it.
Kevin?
Well, Jen, that was my question, but I guess follow-up question was, I think you mentioned that there is some commercial fishing because one source of the fish for you guys was a commercial fisherman. Has there been any potential relationship between offshore commercial fishing and the onshore fishing that you're seeing less on the beaches?
I actually don't know much about the offshore collection of night fish or day fish. I don't know how much they do it or the methods they do it for. Actually, that is a really good question to look into more.
Yeah, and we don't really see much commercial fishing on our territory because we have we're on an MPA, and so we're the only ones allowed to have travel. We have travel exemption, so we're the only ones allowed to take from this beach, and it goes 7 miles offshore. So traditionally, in the area of our monitoring, we don't see commercial fishing because it's on an MPA. So it's not really that cross reference to have of are you catching them out there versus catching them in here.
Thank
Did
you.
you all by any chance have pre and post monitoring before the MPA was established and then after? I can't remember when you said your guys' monitoring program started or not.
I don't think so specifically. I think it might have been around the same timelines, kind of. So we might have a little bit of pre, but I don't think they specifically did anything in target of the MPA pre-post.
Yeah, I think that this is a result of the MPA being tried to enforce on us and trying to cut us out of our own traditional territory to take from. Is what kind of sprung up our marine program to be able to start this protocol and start this monitoring. So that was kind of a result of.
Yeah, because actually a lot of other MPAs in California have no sort of travel exemption for any of the people who naturally would harvest there. They are all just, you're not allowed to do it now, no more, and not allowed to practice. And there was a good amount of community people volunteering to talk and sort of protest and go to the meetings and really make sure that we get our rights and it is written in, because we don't want to be kicked out just for science and preservation when best preservation is us interacting with our environment. Or being a part of our environment, because we are just as much part of it as anything else is.
Thank you all so much. Are there any other questions? Okay, Marissa, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you guys so much. It was great to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rudy and Race. All right, so next up is Michelle Kuntz of the Pulicla tribe of Yurok people, which is formerly Rezagini Rancheria.
Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. Okay, can folks see that? Cool. One sec. Cool. So yeah, my name is Michelle Kunst. I work for Pulicla tribe of Yurok people, and as Marissa said, formerly known as Rezagini Rancheria. And the tribal citizenry of the tribe recently, just in the last month or so, voted to change the name of the tribe to Pulicla tribe of Yurok people. And part of the reasoning of that is to just get closer to culture and identity. And Rezagini was actually the name of an Italian man who the federal government purchased land from in order to establish the reservation. And so there's not a strong connection to that individual or the name. And so it's actually very exciting news to have this new name. And Pulicla means downriver people in the Yurok language. So it's kind of like the word for community and people. So it's just a very exciting change. And Yurok is actually an upriver word for downriver people originally too. So it's exciting for the tribe. I also just want to give a few disclaimers that I have only been working for the tribe since October, so about 8 months, and a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about, including the Tribal Marine Stewards Network and some of the monitoring programs that we have involving estuaries. With the tribe, I have only been involved in for 8 months, so there's so much work that both Rudy and Race and many others have put in a ton of time into before my time. So I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there, as well as the fact that I'm not UROC. I see my role as supporting the tribe and the tribe's goals for growing our marine monitoring program. So that's my position, Marine Natural Resources Manager with the Polyclaw tribe of Yurok people. So I will be kind of covering 2 different things today, but it's all in one presentation because it's all interrelated, and it's also really related to what Rudy and Race were talking about. They're just our neighbors up to the north, and we learn a lot from them and work with them quite often. So first, I'm going to be sharing about the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. I put the website here for folks who want to learn more about it. Much of the information that I pulled into this presentation is from the website. And I'll actually kind of be focusing on what brought the TMSN, Tribal Marine Stewards Network, to the point that they're at today, because I think it's interesting to look at how it was developed. And then also because a unique part of the network is that it's a collaboration of tribal nations. And so each tribal nation should have the right to talk about their own projects. And that's, not our place to share about. So I'll share a little bit about what the tribe that I work for does. But ultimately, the TMSN are tribal nations reclaiming our right to manage and steward the ocean and coastal territories. And yeah, you can read that if you want. Like I said, I pulled a lot of this information from the website, and you can just go to the website to learn more, or you can read my slides. I probably won't read everything. So kind of just the big picture of the TMSN is, as Indigenous peoples, we exercise our inherent rights, responsibilities, and obligations to steward our ancestral territories and to continue to practice cultural lifeways. The Tribal Marine Stewards Network aims to return management of our ocean and coastal territories to California tribes and to ensure Indigenous knowledge drives decision-making, resulting in healthy and viable communities and ecosystems for future generations. So I think to pull something distinct out of that is that it's about the intersection of viable communities, people, and ecosystems. So how they're linked and how they're moving forward together. And so the purpose of the network is to support the autonomy, authority, and capacity building of our member tribes, and to manage ocean and coastal marine resources and ecosystems. We work collaboratively with one another and with state agency and non-governmental supporters to develop tribally led initiatives that build ecological, community, and cultural resilience and return management responsibilities to California tribes in perpetuity. So individual tribal nations working together in a network to collaborate and learn from each other and build capacity, but each tribe is kind of operating their own programs. So to get a little bit more into who are we, so there's 4 founding tribal nations, including Tolowa Dene Nation, just to the north of us, Race and Rudy and Rosa, among many others. Resgini Rancheria, which is now Polyclaw tribe of Yurok people. We've yet to change much of our labeling. So when you see Resgini Rancheria, we now mean Polyclaw tribe of Yurok people. And then recently a 4th tribal nation was added to the network, Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians, and they are to the south in what is now known as Santa Barbara area. And then the network is guided by the oversight of a leadership council. And then we also have many contractors that help provide technical expertise and training, things like GIS. So contractors are involved in our work in building capacity. And then it's up to tribal staff to help lead the programs individually for each tribe. So that's kind of how we're structured up and down the California coast. So now there's 5 tribal nations in the network. So like I said, I'm going to be going into kind of how do we get here. And I decided to put these slides in from our website because I think that it's interesting, like I said before, to think about what happened before this network was created. And so it was kind of cool that Rudy and Race were talking about this earlier. So the state of California law created a network of marine protected areas within state waters, but failed to recognize the unceded tribal gathering rights and customary uses in these same waters. And this lack of acknowledgement catalyzed intertribal advocacy on the North Coast in particular. And so a lot of relationships were built, and there was just a lot of like momentum behind bringing voices back to tribes in the state realm. And so Rudy and Race were talking about how advocacy kind of came out of that time in California state history. So from 99 to 2012, there was a lot of intertribal advocacy, especially in our region up here. And so you guys were also talking a little bit about pre-MPA monitoring. And so I think you guys said that you weren't doing smelt monitoring at that time, but the state did fund baseline monitoring projects. So tribal advocacy and collaboration was involved in several of these, including here on the North Coast. And I think it was kind of specifically rocky intertidal, sandy beach, and estuary habitats as part of the Indigenous Traditional Knowledge Project. So that was like during the formation of the MPAs to get baseline data, which I'm sure many folks on this call were also involved in that project. And then over a course of 2014 to 2019, several founding TMSN tribal representatives participated in learning exchanges with established Indigenous marine conservation programs in British Columbia, Canada, Queensland, Australia, within the state of Hawaii and Washington. And these exchanges offered inspiration and successful models to guide the development of TMSN. So we have Rosa and J-Tuck from Taloa, and then Megan is our executive director, participating in these really inspiring trips around the world to just learn from other communities that have created successful marine conservation programs. And then in 2018 to 2020, this is when conversations with the state really started gaining momentum for tribally led marine management. And so in 2020, tribes convened with Ocean Protection Council staff, California Fish and Game Commission, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then a few other folks to co-create a strategy to advance tribal co-management. And this was like the early framework of the TMSN and led to the pilot, which was, the pilot grant was in 2020 to 2022. OPC funded the 4 founding tribes to start this pilot project of monitoring projects and tribal community engagement activities, including ethnographic interviews, youth camps, and other kinds of outreach and workshops. So this picture here is Ocean Stewards Camp, which Polyclaw Tribe of Yurok people put on. I'm not sure which year this was from, but this is part of our marine program. We're working on growing it, and we're hosting it this summer as well. And then, you know, into the present, the TMSN is continuing to grow, and each individual tribe is continuing to you know, to exercise their sovereignty and management of the marine environments and territories. And so this picture here is folks from the network. I'm not sure when this was, but a couple of years ago, before my time. But a really awesome example of how the network, like the power of the network, is the TIDES project. So the Tribal Intertidal Digital Ecological Surveys project, which is a collaboration with Scripps Institute, Southern California. And it's been really great to have each tribe working on their own similar marine rocky intertidal monitoring project, and especially Taloa, just up to the north of us, be able to collaborate and ask questions to each other and share gear. And so this is just one example of a project that we're each working on individually, but leveraging resources and knowledge. And I think also Smelt is a really perfect example of that, leveraging and collaboration as well, because we've learned so much from Rudy and Race and JTuck, and worked together a lot to develop our tribe's smelt monitoring project, which I will talk about a little bit more later. Yeah, so that's the TMSN, and I think probably I'll just jump into Polyclaw's estuary monitoring projects and then save questions for kind of both topics for the end. And then, but I don't know if Rudy and Race, if you want to add anything about TMSN and things that you think are of value to the network, I think that could be a helpful perspective because you guys have been involved for longer than I have.
Yeah, definitely. I came here into this role about a little over 4 years ago. So I wasn't involved in the creation of this, but we started actually implementing these monitoring projects. It's been great to be able to create relationships with tribes all down the coast and kind of collect knowledge, like you said, but also like see the data and see what you guys are working with and the issues you guys are dealing with, and especially since we're all have like Grace talked about earlier about data sovereignty. That might have been yesterday, but it's great to have that trust in each other because we're in it for our own tribe's intentions, and so it's more of it means more and it's more impactful because we're doing it for each other. It's a network all down the coast, and we're all in it for the same reasons, for our grandparents, for our kids, for generations. And so this is something that's close to all of our hearts, and it's been great to like watch it grow and watch it step up and become more of a family per se, really, because we're all in it for reasons that are more than just a job or more just for research or for careers. This is who we are. And I'm proud to be a part of this, and I think you did a great job kind of representing us. So thank you.
Thanks, Race. Yeah, and I can go back to the map slide of the different tribes that are in the network, or you can visit the website because each tribe has really awesome marine monitoring programs going on, and I think it's worth learning more about what those folks are doing. So I don't think I named them, but Kashaya band of, I think, gosh, what is there? Let me just go back. Yeah, Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians and Amamutsun Tribal Band are the two other tribes that were founding members, as well as the Sani Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. And I also just want to note that, 2020 was the beginning of the pilot, and we just wrapped up that round of funding in 2022 and have moved on to a new round of funding. And there's folks on this call, including foundations that generously support this work. And really, it's just like at the beginning of the network. So there's a lot more opportunity for growth and collaboration with other tribes specifically. And it's really just kind of at this, just early phase of growing and learning how to structure the network. And there's a lot of kind of internal questions about what's the best way to collaborate. Okay, so I will move on to Polyclaw's monitoring program. So my work is more in the marine realm. And so there's some of these projects that I am involved in, but there's some, namely the Junior Creek Restoration Project, that I am not. So I will do my best to give overviews of what that project is. And this is also not all encompassing for the work we do. I tried to pull out things that are related to estuaries. So I'll start with just some pictures of things that I probably will not talk about today, except for the smelt. But here on the top left is our A-frame net. We're out here at Gold Bluffs Beach. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And really, it's going to echo a lot of what Race and Rudy shared. But then this mussel picture in the middle, as well as this picture on the right, a plankton tow, is our harmful algal bloom monitoring program. So we send plankton samples, phytoplankton samples to California Department of Public Health. But we also monitor plankton here in-house with the tribe to watch for specific phytoplankton species that cause harmful algal blooms. And then we also send muscle tissue samples for analysis as well. And that's really just to ensure that folks are eating shellfish and mussels in particular that are safe to eat. And then these bottom two photos are rocky intertidal monitoring. This one in the middle is our tides project that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Basically, we're collecting imagery, really high definition imagery. This is a camera here, if you can see my mouse, over a transect in the intertidal. And then we stitch those images together into a 3D model. So you can like zoom around the model, and it's such high resolution that you can identify species under a single point. And there's 9,000 points in a plot. So it's a really awesome high definition way to look at everything that's going on in the intertidal zone. And then the idea is that it's a long-term monitoring project, and we have 3 years of data now, but that it'll build on itself in years to come. And the tribe is particularly interested in seaweed and mussels. So those are the main species that we're looking at, but also other species that, and then this picture on the left is, so the acronym is marine, but the breakdown is the multi-agency Rocky Intertidal Network. And they have a long-term marine monitoring project that's been going on for about 20 years. And so we are employing the tides monitoring project, but it's really looking at the same information in a different way. So maps, this is my very rudimentary skills with GIS, and also before the name change. So everywhere you see Rezagini, imagine it says Pulley Claw. But so here, this orange square is the reservation. And if you're familiar with the town of Klamath, if you've driven through here, this is Highway 1. And so just before you cross over the river, there's an exit to the reservation. So we're just on the south side of the river, just south of the town of Klamath. And then this star is our office. But looking to this smaller map, this pink line is Yurok ancestral territory. And then that little orange blip is the reservation. And then it's also worth noting that surrounding the Pulley Claw Reservation is the Yurok Tribes Reservation, which is a very unique situation for a reservation to be encompassed by another tribe's reservation. And then this is kind of a more zoomed in detailed map of the area that the reservation is in. So this smaller map, this orange line is representing the Klamath River Basin. And then right here, this purple dot is the Rancheria. So you can see that we're extremely close to the ocean. We're about 3.5 river miles from the ocean and from the mouth. And so this area is actually tidally influenced. And so we get salinity up here, as well as seals and sea lions going up the river. And so while it's not directly in the estuary, it is considered the stream estuary go-tone. And then to name a few watersheds, or a few waterways, which I'm gonna go into more detail in a bit. So this is Junior Creek, and then 2 unnamed tributaries that flow into that, meeting up with Waukel Creek, and then out to the Klamath River. So I'm gonna go into more detail about that in a second here. So this is the project that I don't work on myself, but so a lot of this information is taken from a technical memorandum that we put together earlier this year that's going to be used for reporting purposes and grant application purposes for our restoration project. But staff has been conducting fishery sampling in Junior Creek since 2020 to plan for a restoration project, and also to plan for kind of a general master planning process for the tribe, because as you can see in this map, we're very close to the Klamath River, and actually these lines are flood channels. So every winter the river connects here, and there's these ponds, and then this is just very low elevation, and so the reservation often floods every year. And so this restoration project is for connecting fish habitat, but also for resiliency for tribal residences in our office to basically like, reconstruct culverts and raise the roads to protect residences and offices, but also to improve fish passage. So I was getting a little bit ahead of myself there, but Wachell Creek and its tributary, Junior Creek, are the upstream most tributary to the Klamath River Estuary. Like I said, it's just a couple miles from the ocean, and as such is the first opportunity in the estuary for downstream migrating fish to exit the mainstream river, seeking non-natal rearing habitats. But there's multiple watershed problem areas, including legacy sedimentation from upslope sources. So up here is actually Green Diamond property or logging property. And so water coming down off this hill comes into Junior Creek and Wachell Creek. But also invasive vegetation, channelization. I mentioned those failing culverts and just kind of poor habitat connectivity and diversity. And so here on the right is a couple pictures of Junior Creek and staff doing fisheries monitoring there. And this was taken from the report. The waterways on the reservation offer prime overwinter rearing habitat due to low gradient stream characteristics, creating extensive areas with slow water velocity. Like I said, it's in the stream estuary ecotone, and it offers flow and salinity refugia and abundant food availability. And so there's high growth rates and survival in this area despite these challenges that it faces. This is Junior Pond, or super awesome little wetland that is upstream of the confluence of Junior and Wachell Creeks. And fish like to hang out in here. And so this project will just improve the connection from this pond to the stream and just enhance habitat. So we're pretty excited about that project. And then moving on to smelt population monitoring. So Race and Rudy went into really awesome detail about your project, and I will not be going into as fine of detail, but basically everything they said is pretty similar to, or there's, they're only about like, 30 miles to the north of us, maybe even less. So there's a lot of overlap in what's going on. But as they said, smelt are a very culturally important food source. And I think it's also important to note that they're ecologically a trophic link between primary producers and zooplankton and higher level predators like salmon. And so I'm sure folks on this call who study estuaries are well aware of just the importance of forage fish to an ecosystem, kind of being this link between higher and lower levels of the ecosystem. But they're an under-researched species, and populations are declining. And so there's a lot of need to look more deeply at smelt, both in the sense that they are a culturally important food source and because they're so important to many other factors of an ecosystem. I also wanted to throw this in here because this is an estuary presentation. There's traditional and Western science literature that suggests that smelt spawning grounds are often near freshwater seepage. So sometimes this means near estuaries, including the Redwood Creek estuary, which is where one of our monitoring sites are. This isn't always true. There's some spawning grounds that are not necessarily near freshwater seepage, unless it's like a smaller, like a small unnamed creek flowing into the ocean and seeping under the sand. But there is literature that suggests that estuaries are really important locations for spawning grounds. And then, so staff here at Polyclaw have been monitoring smelt. And when I say smelt, I mean day smelt and night smelt since 2021. So our first project was with a graduate student from 2021 to present, or it's kind of wrapping up this year. And this was on night fish. So Race and Rudy talked about the ecology of night fish a little bit earlier, and how folks kind of transitioned to eating night fish because they're finding that there was just more of them. And so we wanted to look at, look at how their populations are doing. And then we are currently working with another graduate student on day smelt we're basically getting catch per unit effort, CPUE, and also looking at how looking at buoy data and how climate change induced ocean wave conditions might be influencing spawning grounds of smelt. So I don't know if this was said earlier, it might not have been, but you know, smelt school offshore. And then they come to shore to spawn in the sand and gravel on, you know, in the wash zone of the waves. And so we really only see them and catch them when they come to shore. And so you could imagine how changes in, you know, wave conditions would really influence their spawning availability. So if climate change is, you know, there's data suggesting that with climate change, there's going to be higher average wave heights, and that is really going to change, or it probably is going to change how much time smelt have for spawning. And then our monitoring sites for smelt are Gold Bluffs Beach and north of Redwood Creek mouth, so kind of like the north end of Freshwater Beach. Here's some nice pictures. So in the upper left is a smelt that we caught just a few months ago. It was just one rogue little fish. We don't think that they were running yet, and that this individual maybe had just gotten lost and come to shore. And then on the right is Tyler working with Jay Tuck up in Tolowa territory. And then this bottom left is an early morning sampling event at Freshwater Beach or Redwood Creek. And then moving on from smelt, so environmental DNA, we have two different eDNA projects going on simultaneously. This one is with the State Water Board, their swamp program. And this project, maybe folks on this call are also participating in this, but it's a pretty broad sweeping statewide project bringing together many different partners across the state with a huge list of species, including fish, plankton, and macroinvertebrates. And to kind of just look at whether eDNA is a feasible method for statewide water quality monitoring. So this is just a huge collaborative project. Bully Claw has 4 collection sites between Blue Creek, upriver on the Klamath River, and the Klamath River estuary. So here, this picture is showing one of our sites in the estuary. But Blue Creek is quite a ways, like maybe 10-15 miles upriver. And here's some pictures from that project. So here on the top right is Spiggy. He's a council member and a staff person with us. This is kind of he's a lead on this project, and this is Blue Creek in the background. So they're getting an eDNA sample with a Jonah kit. Our other project uses a different setup, and then this is Tyler again. And then on the left are 2 really pretty pictures of the Klamath River estuary, which is, like I said, a site where we collect eDNA. And then this is our other eDNA project. We were actually just out this morning working on this. This device here is a citizen science sampler. So it's kind of a much more robust setup than this syringe system. But it has this pump in here that vacuums water, vacuums air out through one hose and vacuums in water through another, through a filter. This is a collaboration with a graduate student at Cal Poly Humboldt, and he is looking at a wide diversity of marine fish species. Tolowa is also working on this project, as well as a few other tribes and the university. So there's a broad list of species that are being looked at, and his goal is to just create one of the first eDNA metabarcoding fish diversity in Northern California. But the Polyclaw tribe is specifically interested in detecting candlefish or eulachon, which is a species of smelt that is anadromous. So candlefish spawn in estuaries or upriver, but live out in the ocean. But they are very near extinction, if not functionally extinct. There have been very few detections of this species. in the last 10-15 years, although every now and then they are detected. So there's a small sliver of hope, but kindlefish is a culturally important species. They're very interesting. I've obviously never seen one because there's so few now, but they're called kindlefish because they're so dense with oil that it is said that you can light them on fire and they burn like a candle. So just like a really densely oily, fatty fish that apparently was very delicious. And also just looking at other small species, like candlefish. I think that eDNA, one of the kind of most interesting parts of it to me is being able to detect species that you probably wouldn't be able to actually ever get in hand. And, you know, this might be the only way, unless you're kind of randomly catching one when you're looking for another species, but it would be pretty cool to get a detection of candlefish in our eDNA samples. And then our collection sites for this project are the Klamath River Estuary at the Share Air campground on the reservation. That's a business that the tribe runs. So as I mentioned before, we're about 3.5 miles upriver from the ocean, but we wanted to collect data on the reservation, and since it is tidally influenced and there is, you know, brackish water reaching up that high tidally, we thought that that would be our estuary site. And then we also have a ocean site down at Freshwater Beach. And we wanted to sample a little bit closer to the Redwood Creek estuary to be able to look more specifically at that estuary, but the protocols in place for this project wanted a marine site and an estuary site. So we're down on Freshwater Beach, but it is an area that's influenced by the Redwood Creek estuary. And so we hope that if there's species that are using that estuary and that river or that creek, that we would hopefully detect it in this at Freshwater Beach. So that is a very fast and furious overview of some of our projects that relate to estuaries, namely the Klamath River and Redwood Creek estuaries, and the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. So yeah, I guess now would be the time for questions if folks have any. And also just want to open the floor for Rudy and Race to jump in if there's anything else that you thought of with regards to the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. I don't know if I can be the question person, but I see that Marissa has her hand up.
Yeah, go for it, Michelle. You can proctor your own questions.
Thank you so much for that, Michelle. That was a very detailed, fast and furious presentation of all the work that Puliclaw and Puliclaw does, and also about Tribal Marine Stewards Network. So yeah, thank you so much. That's really exciting about the Eulachon, the potential of detecting Eulachon. I was always thinking that up north that they were a little more prevalent, but I guess I must have been totally wrong. But it's been exciting to like hear of these little detections that are seen throughout our area of like they've been detected in Little River and Freshwater Creek in the Bay. And I just learned that one was observed in 10 Mile Creek or 10 Mile River in Mendocino. And so I guess I don't really have a question, but just like that's really exciting about, I'm excited to hear about what y'all find.
Yeah, and a couple things just popped into my mind. I think that it is really exciting and interesting to hear about those detections, because these smelt species only live for like 3 years or so, you know, plus or minus. And so that is telling us that there are reproducing populations out there. Obviously, it's very minuscule, but it does give me hope. And I think that also relates to another thought, which is that Western science and, you know, things like the MPA monitoring, baseline monitoring project, didn't necessarily and historically has not focused on species that are important to tribes. And so part of the TMSN is for tribes to identify species that are important to them and to be able to collaborate and build capacity and learn monitoring protocols in order to focus on species that are important to the tribe and not have to rely on outside agencies to do that work. And so I think smelt is a really good example of that, where, you know, there's folks that research smelt, but like I think like Tolowa is such a great example, and now polyclaw too, but we have now 3 years of data, just, you know, yeah, just being able to answer questions that the tribe has for themselves. Any other questions?
I guess just another thought to add on to what Michelle just said, because now I'm just thinking more and more about it. Like, yes, like how tribes have really led the way and really focusing on these species that are mainly just not ESA listed. You know, like all the money is in salmon, or yeah, all I can think of is salmon. But yeah, I think like tribes have really led the way in focusing on these not commercial, or like seemingly not commercial value fishes, such as smelt or Pacific lamprey, and eulachon. And yeah, so it's always like really amazing to see that work being done by tribes.
Yeah, Rudy or Ray?
Yeah, just really wanted to second what you said, because I felt like we didn't touch up on it enough, but it is a really important thing, is the lack of research that's gone into smelt in particular. I know nightfish studies are a little bit more common and there's been more studies on it, but especially in our area and stuff, there is not enough research going into smelt, considering how important they are to us alone, but just the environment and their significance of their species. It would be really nice to see more projects coming up and along having to do with smelt in particular. And also great
Agreed.
presentation.
Thanks.
Michelle, I have a kind of a general question. There
Yeah.
are a lot of folks on here that are involved in a lot of regional monitoring, and all these programs have like a very generic fish monitoring component, right? Where they're doing like very generic fishing for general community composition. These programs wanted to add some, we're always interested in added like more targeted specific surveys. And if we wanted to add more, you know, culturally relevant targeted surveys that pertained to these different groups, I guess what's the best way to learn more about these species? You know, is it reaching directly out to you or the specific tribes or to the Tribal Stewards Network? Yeah, I guess just where should someone start?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that we've had a focus on smelt in both of our presentations, and you know, I was trying to make a link with estuaries and smelt, but really they're a marine fish, tending to be associated with estuaries sometimes, but you know, they're not necessarily schooling up in California estuaries, as far as I know. I mean, there are other types of smelt that are more in the estuaries, but surf smelt, my understanding is that they don't. I think maybe more in like Washington, where the estuaries are much larger. But yeah, I think another thought that comes to mind is, I think in particular with the Tribal Marine Stewards Network, like part of the goal is to have tribes leading those efforts. And so I think, you know, it's a little bit hard to answer, like, you know, if there's another natural resources group that's doing monitoring in an estuary, I don't think that I'm really the person who can say like how exactly that collaboration happens, because I think that the tribe would have to, you know, individually have that goal themselves. I can speak for Polyclaw in that, we really are interested in building our capacity and learning different sampling protocols and collaborating. But ultimately we want those projects to be, the goals of those projects to be led from a tribal perspective. So I don't know, that's not really a strong answer, but
No, that's I think that's a great answer. And I think
yeah,
that's
I
a good
think
point.
that it's worth reaching out to TMSN if you feel like if you can offer like an idea for a collaboration, and it might not always work out. And it's interesting because we have 5 different tribes up and down the coast of California, and so maybe if you had a particular project in those areas, that collaboration would happen. Maybe that connection could be made through the TMSN, but ultimately what happened with each individual tribe.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions from anyone else online? Okay, well, thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you to Rudy and Race. I really appreciate you all taking the time to speak today. We're super grateful. And if you're willing to share your slides, I would love to send them out with the meeting notes as well.
Sure. Yeah, I can send that.
We'll send them over too.
Okay, great. Yeah, is there anything else anyone wanted to share as it relates to kind of the topics we've been talking about? I'm just going to share just my last slide to bring us back to.
Just one last thing to focus on what we're trying to say.
Yeah.
Would be, it's not necessarily just the decline of the species itself. I think for us, it's really important for us because it's culturally involved with the process. So if you can't harvest, you can't do the traditional practices, you can't teach those traditional practices, and then the culture also loses out and starts to dwindle away too. So it's not just the fish, but the lack of fish, which means that we're losing out on the tools to be able to teach our younger generation how to do these things. And so it trickles down to our own culture, which means our identity. And so that's kind of how this relates to us. Is it's a food source, but it's also a pathway to culture that we lose out when we don't have this fish. So it's more than just one thing. It's a community event, and we lose out on our identity when we can't actually fish for these things, to teach our children how to and create a taste for the fish. And then they're older and have a chance to taste fish, and they don't like it because they didn't grow up eating it. And that's something that we focus heavily on, is the cultural part and the spiritual part of the fishing and the harvesting, to be able to like relate that and teach that to our children.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really great point for us all to hear. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up our meeting with just talking a little bit about where we're going next. So we do have a scheduled meeting for September 11th from 1 to 3, but we have been in discussions to work with CWMW, so the California Wetland Monitoring Workgroup. And so the question here is whether or not we want to have this joint meeting. I think that there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of benefits. I think one of the main benefits is talking about how our products and objectives from our 2 work items and our goals can relates to the California Wetland Monitoring Workgroup. CWMW is older than CEMW, and CEMW was born out of the Wetland Monitoring Workgroup, so we have a lot of history. And so my question to you all is, workshops are usually better in person. And so we were thinking Sacramento. And then I was wondering if August or September was better. So if you have a preference, you can drop that in the chat. The co-chairs of CMW are working with the co-chairs for the wetland group. Our next steps are to develop a specific agenda, identify other targeted participants. I know that our numbers are starting to decrease. The wetland monitoring work group's numbers are kind of starting to decrease. So we want to work towards building some more capacity within our groups. We want to select date and location, and then our main objective is to define some desired outcomes of a joint meeting. So we definitely want this meeting to be useful, as well as to have some practical outcomes. So like I said, we've been brainstorming some potential topics. So we'd have this meeting would be more topic oriented, where we could talk about how to connect monitoring data to management actions, talk about how all of our regional monitoring could feed into 305B reporting. So that's reporting coming from the Water Board and EPA, and then using monitoring data to help support development of performance standards and just to demonstrate how regional monitoring data could inform grant funding priorities. So we've got some work to do, but I just wanted to gauge general interest on an in-person meeting in the fall and whether or not August or September was better. So if anyone had any thoughts or other ideas too, now would be a good time to voice your thoughts.
Jan, the CWMW meeting in August is currently scheduled for August 5th.
Okay. And we can
Um,
obviously pick a different date too in August and
Yes.
September. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it'd be early August, early September. We can pick a new date if people had preferences.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin.
Hey, Jan.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Christina.
Hi.
I'd like to advocate, great to see everyone today. Wonderful presentations. I would like to personally advocate for September just because I expect summer's such a crazy time with vacations, and I feel like particularly for government employees, it seems like we get better attendance for things in September than August. Just wanted to throw that out there.
I love it. That's the feedback we needed. Cool. Okay. And we're not wed to September 11th either. So great. Thanks, Christina. And if you have ideas of potential topics too, you can, well, I'll be talking to you soon, so we can talk more about it as well. Anyone else have preferences?
I prefer September 11th if we have to pick a September date.
Okay. And then do people like this idea of joining forces? So it would be the estuary group and the wetland group. We could share ideas and talk about how we can move wetland and estuary monitoring forward.
Well, as one of the co-chairs of the CWMW, Jan, I think it's a great idea. I think cross-pollination between the work groups is essential because there's a lot going on in the two spaces. It'd be great if we could talk to each other and share our ideas and how we're moving forward.
Okay.
I agree. I like the idea of merging forces, but would like there to be a virtual option because it might be hard for me to get up there to Sacramento.
Yeah.
Just flagging that given the state's current travel restrictions, any virtual option effectively means that no state employee is going to be able to travel in person unless it's in Sacramento. So that is the one caveat.
Well, this is going to be a
caveat.
different fiscal year, Pike. So, I mean, the situation probably won't change, but
I don't think I was cautiously optimistic before the May revise, and now we're just hanging our heads low. But I appreciate the optimism, Christina.
I would also add that Sacramento in August and September is really terrible. So having a virtual option is always great. I love the idea of combining both. I think I love the idea of the case studies for level 1, level 2, level 3. I think by then the WRMP is going to, in particular, have case studies that we would love to present for level 1 and level 3. We're working on our level 2. I don't think we're going to have results by September though. So I love that idea.
I will say that we have found that a virtual meeting is a little bit less outcome driven typically than an in-person meeting, which is why we were pushing for Sacramento, just because we thought that we could get more people. But we will keep talking about it. Okay, anything else?
Thank you, Jan.
Okay, so that's all that we have today. You've got 15 minutes back in your day. Thank you again to all of the presenters, and I will be sending out all of the information following. So thanks, everyone.